Alright, hello everyone, welcome back to my second mini album review video of 2026. I know I just uploaded one not long ago. I'm not sure exactly when this video is going to be live, so maybe it was a bit longer ago now since my last video, I don't know. But yeah, I got more mini album reviews today, 10 albums I want to talk about. As always, these are all just my personal opinions on these albums, and these are, again, mostly albums from smaller acts, just stuff I was finding when I was looking for new music that came out at the start of 2026. And again, it's just my personal opinion on these albums. There might be some, there definitely are some smaller artists on this list, and I don't want to be like hating on smaller acts. It's just some albums, they just don't click for me, and that's just the way it is. But I still think hopefully it helps out the artists, giving them a little bit more attention. Again, I know I don't have that many followers and my videos don't get a lot of views, but still, some people watch my videos and maybe you'll discover some music you really love, so who knows. But I'm going to share my opinions on these albums. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But without further ado, let's get the reviews started with... Here's an artist I hadn't heard of before from Munich, Germany, making this nearly 50-minute album, which he describes being about the exhaustion of work and how busy life gets, especially when it sacrifices human connection and relationships. But he also says he wants people to interpret it in their own ways. Now, a couple things to note. One being that I couldn't find the lyrics, and not only can I not usually hear them clearly, but it's also in multiple languages, and unfortunately I only know English, so I cannot really comment much on the lyrics. Now, I saw this album described as electronic music, but it's very much not what I was expecting. I kind of thought it would be a typical electronic album, and yet instead we got this really trippy, experimental project in which you never know what's going to happen next. At points it almost feels kind of Radiohead-esque. And look, I wish I could say I like this more than I do. But in all honesty, these kinds of albums almost never totally work for me. I like experimental music, don't get me wrong, but when it feels like the artist is just throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks, it almost becomes pure luck when I do really find one of those albums to be up my alley. And here, well, there are moments that I like. Concoct Topography is very eerie and simultaneously peaceful and calming with those lush synths atop that sick bass line, which is just quiet enough to be subtle, but also absolutely makes a huge difference. And I really like the build of that track too. And there are other moments I quite like, such as the weird but oddly satisfying talking as a muscle movement too tense. And there are moments here and there within some of these tracks that are quite pretty, but as a whole it just feels like a bunch of fragments that don't really fit together. And I don't think it's a full album as a full album experience is really worth going back to for me. So, light 6 out of 10. Alright, I had no idea what I was getting into with this one. Especially because I skipped over this band's debut and just went straight into this sophomore album, which I didn't really know anything about going in. And even now, I don't really know who PIGPEN is, but I decided to give this a couple listens. Again, it's one of those random albums I just found somewhere online. And it's certainly a punishing punk album that is very unsettling, and there's a lot of intensity in the screamed vocals and the heavy distorted sounds. And it's not really for me. I personally find this kind of difficult to listen to at points, and I kind of wish it had been remastered a bit, and I feel like I've also heard a lot of albums like it, and it doesn't really do a whole lot to stand out much to me, but this is also a very bleak look at someone experiencing loss, and then the effect that that has on the narrator and the following spiral out of control, at least if I'm interpreting this correctly. And yeah, it's heavy stuff, both lyrically and sonically, although I feel like I'm probably missing a lot more detail and meaning here. But I just personally find it to be a bit too much to handle, and the lyrics don't really resonate with me personally. It doesn't mean it's bad, it's just not my thing at all. And, again, while I do find this kind of hard to listen to at points, there are other moments where the screams and intensity and kind of held back production style does actually have some real impact. Even though I'm probably not going to go back to this even in pieces. So for me, it's a 5 out of 10. I can't say for sure whether or not you'll like it, but I do hear the effort, and I wouldn't say it's a complete failure. So yeah, if any of this sounds interesting, maybe give it a shot, I guess. So here's another album by an artist I'd never heard of, and this one is quite unsettling. But not in a bad way at all. It's a sort of experimental project that is mostly ambient, and a lot of it is instrumental, but there are also some moments with vocals. And I can respect this for what it is, but personally it didn't really do a whole lot for me. I prefer the more ambient moments on this project, but even then there's not really a lot for me to go back to. But while this album absolutely is not for me, and I personally find the vocals kind of grating at points, I can still totally understand how the unsettling mood of this project and the unpredictability might make this a much more intriguing listen for other listeners. Maybe I've just heard too much like this that it just doesn't wow me as much. I'm not sure. But I do know I'm most likely not going to remember this at all, or at the very least I won't be going back to it. Honestly, it reminds me in a weird way of Ethel Cain's Perverts, which came out around this time last year, except this is way shorter and I personally like it better. But still, this is a 5 out of 10 for me. But I do still recommend it if you're looking for a very experimental ambient project with some surprises along the way. Might be worth checking out. It was interesting, I'll give it that much. So like with pretty much every album in this video, I randomly found this online when I was looking for new albums to review, and I had absolutely no idea what to expect. But anyway, here we got the self-titled debut from Alice's Mine, and I looked at this album's Bandcamp page, and it mentioned Alice being a metaphor for patterns of life which we always return to even after we convince ourselves they're totally in the past. Now, most of the lyrics are in Korean, so I had to look at translations to try and understand what's being said here. But what I can say with certainty is that the music on this project is pretty kick-ass, because what I'm very impressed by is how well this album simultaneously brings so much atmosphere but also intensity, which is not an easy thing to pull off at all. Yeah, there are plenty of albums that do each of those things individually really well, but here it simultaneously feels like a punk album while also having an almost ethereal vibe to it. And the strong combination of these two things is made even better by those excellent drum timbres that feel very classic rock in a lot of ways, and make perfect sense on an album like this, where they may not be as heavy or hard as you'd expect on a modern day rock album, but they fit into this mix and atmosphere perfectly. And looking at the translations of the lyrics, well, it's always hard to tell how accurate translations are, but I like the constant back and forth between running away and recognizing that the narrator will eventually return to whatever that old state is. And the imagery is quite strong too in certain moments. Now, pair it with such great melodies and vocals that fit each individual song really well most of the time, and I think we got the first great album of 2026. I think this might end up being among the very best albums of 2026 for me, or it also might not end up sticking with me as much as I'd like. Neither of those scenarios would surprise me. It's not the most catchy album I've ever heard, where the big hooks are really standing out to me. I like it melodically a lot, but I think time's going to have to tell. I will be returning to this, I'm sure, but we'll find out just how much it sticks with me or how little it sticks with me. Either way, for now, I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. I was not expecting to like it this much, but it's absolutely a welcome surprise early in the year. Great album. Here's the debut studio album from another band I'd never heard of before, and it's kind of a standard indie rock record, but is mostly on the mellower side while still fitting into the description of rock, in my opinion. At least in moments on this album, because toward the later parts of the record it becomes more consistently mellow. And honestly, like with a lot of the albums in this video, I don't really have a ton to say about this one. And that's partially because I was feeling kind of sick when I was listening to it, so maybe I just couldn't fully take it in and process it as much as I would have liked. But overall, I just found this kind of underwhelming. There are some nice melodies here and there, and the lyrical style is kind of charming, very pop music-esque in the ways the feelings of the narrator are described here, and the production is fairly solid. But nothing here really wowed me, and after a while I start to get tired of the vocals, which aren't bad, but don't really have that much variety throughout the album, and the vocal effects are sometimes kind of annoying. So yeah, not bad vocals, but I just got tired of it. And yeah, honestly, it just kind of starts to feel like I'm listening to the same song over and over again, and when none of them are particularly good, I think I gotta give this a strong 5 out of 10. It's fine, it's not that long either, but I'm probably just gonna forget this came out. I wasn't really sure what I was getting into with this one. I saw this described as both ambient and post-rock, which is definitely an interesting combination. And it's a nearly 40-minute album with only one track that takes up the entire running time. But I thought I may as well give it a shot, and, well, it's got some pleasant moments. The first point of the album where I was really intrigued was around the 9-minute mark when the ascending bass line came in, really giving this a nice meaty texture, especially with those sparkly sound effects in the background. Then a couple minutes later, I start to get a bit bored with this project, but then I do like when the drums get more intense later on. And then the album goes for more experimental, artsy sound, and unfortunately, I don't think it really works. Although I do kind of like the switch up just before the 28-minute mark, even though the drums kind of overpower the mix. Overall, this album is not bad by any means, but it isn't consistent enough or interesting enough as a whole to really make me want to seek it out. So, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's a cool experiment, and this artist did put out another album this year, which I'm kind of curious to check out. I'm not sure if I will or not, but I might. But yeah, this one did not feel like essential listening. Still might be worth a shot, though, if you're interested. So I randomly stumbled upon this black metal album online from an act I never heard of, and turns out it's Andy Marshall, the same man behind Sur, another black metal project which I've really liked from the few albums I'm familiar with. But I also know releasing music under a different name often means the music is going to be quite different, and here that is absolutely the case. Much more straight ahead standard black metal without a whole lot to make it stand out as being super unique, which is why I definitely prefer the two most recent Sur albums over this one. And I'm not really familiar with Sur's other albums, so I cannot really comment on comparing those to this one. But look, don't get me wrong, this is not bad by any means. I actually mostly enjoyed it, even though the production does get a little foggy at points. But this doesn't have a whole lot going for it, in my opinion, beyond just being standard black metal. Yeah, there's some nice intensity, and the guitar melodies are solid, and it has a nice mix of different moods and vibes throughout. But I don't know, maybe I just set my expectations too high. I did put Sur's latest album, Amidst the Ruins, pretty high on my list of my favorite albums of 2025. And for me, this album is just kind of underwhelming. I couldn't find the lyrics for this project anywhere, and I can't hear what they are, so I cannot really take that into consideration for my review. But honestly, I'm not sure those could even fully save this for me. I do think the closing track is a pretty awesome intro, and from there it goes into some interesting passages with some cool synths, but even then, it's not enough to make me call this great or even particularly close. I mean, it is good, enough for me to give it a light 7 out of 10, but I'd recommend listening to Sur instead. This feels more like a side project. Here's another very quick review of an ambient project, this one once again being from an act I'd never heard of, and this is the sort of ambient music which is mostly based on constant drones, but more is built on that, and while the first two tracks felt a lot more simple to me, on the third track this actually builds quite a bit. And then the fourth track is also kind of like the third, in that there's quite a bit of change throughout, and in this one the drone eventually becomes overtaken by everything else going on around it. Overall though, I didn't really like this project that much. I think for hardcore fans of ambient music this might be more up your alley. I can certainly see the appeal of this album, especially in the second half, even though I kind of prefer the first half and the simplicity of it, even though none of this really did much for me at all. So yeah, overall I'll give this a 5 out of 10, but it is an interesting project that has some nice subtleties that will probably have a lot of impact for the right audience. For me, it's just okay. Here's a band I'd never heard of until recently, but it looks like they've actually had a decent amount of critical acclaim in the past. Although this is their first album in over a decade, and I saw them described as death metal, which did not have me super excited for this album. But I will admit I ended up liking this more than I expected I would. And I think it's partially because rather than being a full-on death metal album, this falls somewhere between death metal and black metal. Yeah, it's very heavy musically, and the vocals are quite harsh, but it's got some melodies and at points can feel very movie soundtrack-esque. And especially toward the end of the record with tracks like The Purity of Emptiness and Soar to Fall, the guitars and drums pair really well to hit like a ton of bricks, and the melodies are quite strong as well. Honestly, I'm shocked by how well this turned out. Some of these tracks really soar, even though I think it probably works better as a whole album than a collection of individual tracks. And thus, yeah, I'll admit this is damn near great. I could not find most of the lyrics, although there were some apocalyptic themes in some of them that I could find, which the music does a really good job of capturing. But yeah, really satisfying album musically, and while I might nitpick a little bit about the vocals being kind of buried in the mix at points, I do wish they were louder, which could have made them feel more like another instrument. This is still getting a strong 7 out of 10 for me. I'm not quite sure it hits greatness for me, but it's damn close and absolutely worth giving a chance. Alright, here's another really short one, the last one of this video. It's a really solid black metal album with some good guitar melodies, and it's quite well produced as well. It's also a debut from this band, so I'm curious to see if they can improve in the future, even though I really enjoyed this. Now, it's not the most amazing thing ever. I should mention I could not find lyrics for this album, and again, it's one of those cases where it's hard to hear what the vocals are saying, so I cannot comment on that. But the musical progression is really cool, with a nice variety of different styles of black metal, where the heavier, faster moments are made more noteworthy by some mellower moments as well. Now, all this being said, I do wish there were more layers in the instrumentation to make this really stand out even more. But you know what, for what it is, I think it takes a pretty simple approach to black metal and does a pretty good job of it. So I'll give it a solid 7 out of 10. Really good stuff. Not something I'll probably be returning too much, but for what it is, I can still praise it. It was well put together. Good album. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm hoping that this video is hopefully uploaded pretty soon after the first mini album review video of this year for me. But we'll see about that. We'll see how busy I end up getting. But I've already got some more mini album reviews in the works. I'm hoping to maybe do some individual album reviews soon too. We'll have to see. But for now, thank you for watching. Feel free to let me know in the comment section what you thought of these albums, or if there's any albums you'd like me to review, ideally from 2026. And yeah, let me know what you thought of my video, or don't let me know if you don't want to let me know, but let me know what you thought if you do want to. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at these outros. But anyway, I'll see you all later. Thank you.